From Councillor Benny this morning, and Councillor Keogh is joining us online. I'm not sure who's with us yet or not. Okay. Same as every other meeting, we'll start with the council protocol. All visitors must sign into the visitor book at the entrance to Colin Craig. This includes council staff from other buildings. There is no planned fire evacuation drill or alarm test today. If the fire alarm is activated during your visit, you must exit the building immediately. Council officers will direct you to the nearest fire exit and will escort you to the building fire assembly point beside the Silver Man at the top of Parliament Walk. Kilncraig staff should report to the floor's assembly point. You should remain at your assembly point until directed to reoccupy the building and only re-enter once the fire marshal is advised that it is safe to do so. Please do not attempt to leave the site of the vehicle until cleared to do so by the fire marshal to ensure that access routes are kept clear for emergency vehicles. Please note this is a public meeting and the members of the public may be in attendance. The meeting will be recorded by the clerk and published online for public viewing. The taking of photographs, including screenshots, audio or video recordings, are not permitted during the meeting unless with express permission of the convener. Can members attending virtually activate their cameras where possible to enable you to join with video, and all attendees mute their microphone when not speaking. Please do not come in during any item unless invited to do so. Members attending virtually wish to speak on any point, please indicate by clicking on the raise your hand button, and members in the chamber should just also raise their hands, so I'll bring in at an appropriate time. If members have not been able to access all papers for the meeting, could you please indicate this now? We will hear each of the items set out in the agenda, and I'll invite the officer to present the paper, and members will then have the opportunity to ask questions before we proceed to debate the decision. Do you have any declarations of interest for the matters contained in today's agenda? Nope. Okay, thanks. Item 3 then in the agenda is the budget context and outlook report, which will be presented to us by Lindsay, section 95 officer.
Thank you and good morning, Council. This paper has been prepared in consultation with the Chief Executive and the Monitoring Officer to be read in conjunction with the Council's General Services Budget for 25-26, which follows later on this Council agenda. The paper aims to allow elected members to consider broad issues of the Council's financial resilience and sustainability ahead of taking its decisions. This week, political economist John McLaren issued one of his regular briefings to Directors of Finance across all 32 Scottish local authorities. In his conclusion, he states that the funding prospects for Scottish Government post-25-26 are for historically low settlements with real term cuts. This outlook comes after more than a decade of challenging settlements for Scottish local government and does not appear to herald an imminent improvement in that trend. For this reason, the paper has the twin themes of service and financial sustainability at its heart. It sets out the challenging operating context of Clackmannanshire, which, whilst it is Scotland's smallest mainland authority when viewed from a population perspective, it's not the smallest when considered through the lens of our geographical, physical footprint or the level and complexity of the need of many residents within our communities. The paper then looks at the Council's financial context and outlook, specifically highlighting the 71 million of savings made since 2010. This is a material sum when considered in the context of the current year's revenue budget of 161 million, and which has required the Council to make a number of difficult decisions in previous years. The paper also shows that irrespective of the 71 million savings already made, the significant range of partnership arrangements in place to deliver services, significant innovation and transformation, and an impressive amount of leveraged external resource, the Council still faces further significant financial challenges in the future based on our financial projections. This means that the Council needs to keep service and financial sustainability at its heart of decision-making, ensuring that wherever possible there is a shared focus on identifying and implementing permanent reductions in expenditure, increasing income, minimising cash savings, and minimising or preferably avoiding the use of reserves to support budget setting. It is equally important that the Council invest in those activities which will contribute to delivering service and financial sustainability in the medium to longer term, and that short-termism in decision-making is also avoided. Specifically, this includes continuing to invest in innovation and transformation, but also remaining open to exploring and testing other potential options for delivering services. Section 5 of the report sets out some of these current activities, but also seeks input from Council in respect of any other proposals or options that could be considered. I hope that this advice is helpful ahead of taking your decisions on the remaining budget setting papers on this agenda, and I'm happy to take any questions supported by colleagues. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Paper's now open for questions. Have you got any questions? Councillor Rennie?
Just a point of clarification, really, Lindsay, because we weren't really sure. Obviously, this refers to some of the aspects involved in the budget, and bearing in mind that we've put in an amendment to the budget, does that mean that if we vote for this, we're voting for the budget? Or is it just accepting what's in this paper?
Each paper is considered on its own merit, so you would be approving the recommendations within this report only.
Any further questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Forson.
Thanks, Lindsay, and thanks for that report. I think it lays out the context that we're all fully aware of in relation to the financial situation. I've got a number of questions, if you don't mind. I suppose I'm interested in understanding what your view is on the long-term impact of the Council's financial stability if the current reliance on reserves to balance budgets continues, and what ways can this be mitigated?
Thank you. So I think set out in the paper is very much that point around that long-term or medium-term financial sustainability, and the comments around reducing reserves, the use of reserves. These are one-off options. Once we have used reserves, we are not able to use them again. So we then push the problem down into later years. So you can see from the budget gap that's presented in this paper and in the budget report that's later on the agenda that we have a significant budget gap into 26-27 of just over 7 million, rising up to 19 million by 29-30. So by using one-off reserves, that is not enabling us to reduce that gap on a permanent basis. We need to be able to reduce our expenditure permanently and increase our income permanently to be able to minimise that gap.
Thank you, Convener. I was just going to add as well that obviously Council will remember we fairly recently had our best value audit work and was reported through this Council chamber as well. We have had over many years now engagement with the auditors where they have commented on the need to move away from using reserves to support the budget. Most recently, just last week, I met with the Controller of Audit at Audit Scotland, and one of the questions that she asked me is when the Council budget meeting was, whether or not balance had been achieved, but specifically was the Council intending to use any reserves to balance the budget. In response to that, because I'm sure that would be the follow-through question, what did you say, Nikki? My response was, as set out in the budget paper, that the budget that's being proposed aims to strike a really delicate balance really between minimising the use of reserves, ensuring that there is sufficient cover for any risks and uncertainties that exist, but also is focused on delivering in the medium to longer term. So making sure that we continue to invest in those activities, particularly around transformation and innovation, that would allow us to deliver service and financial sustainability as we go forward.
Thanks for that. So just following up there, if the Council were to use one-off reserves to balance the budget, how is this going to affect its ability to respond to both those identified and potentially unidentified financial pressures in the coming year?
As is said, reserves being finite, once they're used, they're used. If we do not have enough reserves to cover the significant challenges that might come up, so things like pay, the unfunded national insurance element, then we would have to look to come back to set a revised budget. And we would have to potentially look at reducing our expenditure, which would potentially mean cuts to frontline services to enable us to do that, to meet those pressures.
Okay, so that kind of follows, my question follows on for that. I was going to ask you what the potential consequences for service delivery were if the reserves are exhausted due to the balancing of the budget.
So we're needing to make reductions in expenditure. We may have to reduce our services, so service delivery, which could mean job losses, as we're not able to fully fund the pay for all the staff that we have at the moment. So there could be job losses and a reduction in services to users as well.
If I could add to that as well, thank you, Convener. So I think one of the things that I would bring councillors' attention to is the information that you received in terms of the proposals that were being actively considered this year. So you've seen the range of savings. They were extremely challenging, and it actually demonstrates what Lindsay described in the introduction to this paper, which is we've already taken £71 million worth of savings against our current revenue budget of 161 million. That means that there is no easy way forward in terms of savings. There are no easy savings left. So the types of things we would be looking at would have significant impact in terms of service delivery. So the things that haven't been included in this budget but were presented as options involved looking at the cessation or reduction in a range of statutory service delivery areas. So that would be where we would have to look if we have to come back and look at another budget again in the year.
So I was going to ask, if we got to the point where the pressures stripped what we had, would we be looking at bringing a kind of emergency budget to the council for consideration?
Yes, we would have to bring a revised budget for council to approve that reduction in services and expenditure.
Thanks. There was another question I wanted to ask, and it was just in relation to the pressures that were identified for the IGB. I think we're already seeing over £6 million of pressures identified for this year, and my understanding is that the starting point for the IGB is around about £20 million deficit before they even set their budget for this year. What discussions have been had around about how these are going to be mitigated?
Sorry, if that's okay, I'll take that one, Councillor, on the basis that I've received the correspondence on this. So, to date, the situation at the moment is there's a little over a £12 million overspend in the current financial year, and an underlying deficit as we move forward into just over 24 million for next year. So what has happened is that the interim chief officer, Joanna, who's here today, and I'm going to ask her to just confirm some of this in a moment, is she's written to each of the chief executives in the partnership, so myself, chief exec at Stirling Council and the chief exec at NHS Forth Valley. We've been given three options for a potential risk share in terms of the current year's overspend position. And those discussions have yet to take place. So as yet, there's still an ongoing dialogue on that, but I'm just conscious that Joanna may be able to add to that, so I'll invite her up if that's okay.
Good morning, elected members. Shortly after coming into post at the beginning of January, I felt compelled to write to the three chief executives advising them of our projected financial position. My elected member colleague, Councillor Forson, is absolutely correct in our projections at that point were over 20 million. Yesterday we did an IGB development session. There's been significant work undertaken over the last month. Our projected gap for 25-26 has reduced to 17.4 million, and our projected overspend just this past month has reduced from just over 12 million overspend this month projected for this financial year down to just over 11 million. So we are continuing to work at pace in order to reduce that and that risk, but I'm pleased to say that the gap for next year has reduced significantly. We're continuing to work on that.
My apologies.
No, it's all right. So, I mean, realistically, I think the IGB sets its budget March, April, and, you know, there's lots of transformation work going on, and I understand that. But realistically, is it likely that that deficit for this year is going to be reduced to zero? And is it likely that you're going to be able to reduce the kind of, you know, starting deficit to zero?
My apologies, it's my first budget meeting. I think it's unlikely that we will reduce to zero for this year, and it is looking a possibility that we won't fully bridge the gap for next financial year.
Just another question. I mean, we're all aware of the situation with the employees' national insurance contributions. We're seeing that as an £800,000 pressure for Clackmannanshire Council. Have we did any work on the impacts that this is going to have on our third sector providers and on our third party providers, so those people who provide social care and those people who provide early years and a number of other services throughout Clackmannanshire? So do we know yet what the impact is going to be on them? And do we know whether there's any expectations that the council will have to fund these too?
So as you know, the national insurance increase in employers' national insurance will affect all organisations that pay salaries. So these commission services, excuse me.
I'll take over just for now while Lindsay just is okay. So in terms of the assumptions that have been made, the planning assumption we've got nationally at the moment is that 60% of the cost of the increase in employers' national insurance contributions will be funded. I think, as we've previously advised councillors, we will not have confirmation of the actual position until after the spring budget announcement from UK government. So there's cover within the pressures reserve. There's an assumption that we will get the funding for 60%, but that we will have to fund the other 40%. We've received no cover for third-party organisations. And in direct response to your question, we're already starting to see an increase in correspondence from organisations like that. So, for instance, I've just received and had an approach by one of the MPs as well on behalf of Scottish Autism that raised a significant pressure. I think it was in the order of about £800,000, and we're seeking support for that. I'm aware of others that have come through the FOI route and complaints route as well. So this, seeing through various channels, we're starting to get some contacts on this.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? She's handing up. Councillor Brosselli.
Thanks, Chair. The assumption of a 3% wage rise, how's that been arrived at, given the pressures that we seem to have from everywhere, really, in the cost of living increases, etc.?
The assumption on the pay increase of 3% that we've included in the projections for 25-26 is based on the Scottish Government public sector pay policy of 9% over 3 years, so an average of 3%. It is an assumption, as we know, that it's set by negotiations, national negotiations through COSLA and leaders, so we don't automatically just apply the public sector pay policy. Early indications are we've made an offer of 3%, which has been rejected, and unions have made representations around 6%. So we've made that assumption based on the public sector pay policy, and I've also asked through other directors of finance across Scotland, and the average assumption is 3% on pay for those areas as well. We have to do a balance of what's affordable, although 3% is not affordable because we have significant pressures. It's a reasonable assumption based on that information.
And nationally, if it is above 3%, I take it we have to take the money from reserves. Is that correct?
If the pay award was above 3% and there was no additional funding coming through Scottish Government or other means, then we would have to look to fund that elsewhere. So it's a permanent increase in expenditure, so we would need to find that on a permanent basis. So using reserves would just be a plug for the 1 year. We would have to then find that on a permanent basis. So again, that would need permanent reductions in expenditure or permanent increases in income.
Thank you.
Councillor, I was just going to add as well that COSLA's is that they do seek on a regular basis, make representations to Scottish Government to seek additional funding to cover any pay award that is agreed over and above the public sector pay policy, and that's been the case for a number of years now.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Coyne?
Thanks, Chair. I'm trying to understand the principle here. The auditor, the advice given to us was not to use reserves to prop up the budget, but we are using some reserves in the budget. So obviously a conscious decision has been taken to not cut this and this, but to use some of those reserves. So I just wondered what guided that thinking? You know, why was it okay to ignore the advice and not cut some services, you know, doing what you were told, as it were?
In setting out the options for the budget, you have to present all the options around what what savings could be made in terms of savings for services, reductions in services. However, there is a balance because we still have to provide statutory services. We still have to provide those services to our residents. So I'll maybe ask Councillor Fortune if she wants to come in terms of the proposed budget there, because it's on the basis of administration. But it's in terms of we haven't ignored advice because we've tried to limit the use of reserves. And we've used a lot less reserves this year than we have in previous years on that basis. So whilst trying to balance it by protecting frontline services, but recognising that we might still have to use some reserves. And we've got the transformation activity and the activity just described in the budget context and outlook paper just presented that is looking to make that transformation and change how we deliver services to try and reduce our expenditure in the future. So it's a balance to be able to support that activity, protecting frontline services, but recognising that there is some reserves that we may need to use to do that.
Sorry, thank you. I've just crept in ahead as the leader, but I was just going to make the point as well that when we're looking at the use of reserves, we also have tried to, I think we spoke about this a little bit at the briefing, that balance, it is a judgment that there's some known risks. We know they're going to come to fruition, but you can't necessarily quantify them. So one of the points that we made around that particular line, so it appears in the later paper as, what do you call it, service pressures reserve, didn't we? Service pressures reserve in the later paper. That the comment that's made alongside that is that there's an issue about affordability because already I think that reserve is roughly 3 million. We already think with the things that are on that line, there may be required to ration because we don't know that 3 million will cover that. So there's a significant affordability consideration that's been in the mix as well, thinking about use of reserves. I think as well, the point in terms of external audit, we have had, the conversations are not just, you know, they're not transactional in terms of don't use reserves. Obviously it's a judgment for council, but what they are focused on is seeing the council moving towards delivering financial and service sustainability. The reasons where council has used reserves in past budget decisions has been to save off the cessation or reduction in statutory services. And we're able to demonstrate that if you look back at the savings proposals that officers have made, you can see actually, I mean, you often say to us as officers, we're seeing the same things again and it's getting, you know, and it's because the use of reserves there was a conscious decision some years ago about trying to avoid going into impacting adversely on statutory services. taken through the various administrations that have been proposed in the budgets. So it's been that fine balance of protecting statutory services, minimising the use of reserves, but also investing in the future. So a bit of a long-winded answer, but it's not a straightforward transactional, don't use reserves. I think there's judgment in there, and we need to articulate that thought process when we engage with auditors and other external stakeholders.
Councillor Forson.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to come in, particularly in the administration budget, although I think we're probably starting to stray into the kind of comments and the debates that we'd have in the next paper. I mean, I've sat around the table with probably nearly every councillor in this room, and we've had discussions about the proposals that were put forward by officers, and I think we came to pretty much agreement around about what was acceptable and what was not. And from an administration purpose, it was protecting the statutory services that provided the biggest impact to our most vulnerable kind of communities. That's something that we've agreed about. It's something that we've set out in our council priorities. And in relation to kind of the decisions about what funding to use, say for example, to support the transformation fund, we have committed as a council time and time again to moving forward with the transformation programme. We've always known it was going to come to a peak point. We're just about to reach that peak point over the next year. At the last Be the Future board, there was a lot of discussion around about the commitments to the funding and how additional funding was required to top up to allow us to meet those transformation programmes. And without adequate funding, we're not going to be able to do the collaborative work with our colleagues and other local authorities. We're not going to be able to move towards more sustainable models. So for me, there was decisions around about, do we want to continue with that or do we want to put that at risk? These decisions are never easy. It's one or another. And I have to, as an administration, weigh up what I think is acceptable for us as an administration to move forward with. Other people might have, kind of other views on that, and that's perfectly right. But as an administration, that's something, the budget that we put forward, but we felt that it was the best in the circumstances that we have.
Councillor Coyne. Okay, Councillor Martin.
Yeah, my question's in relation to the distribution mechanism. I mean, clearly over years, where you've been successful in garnering additional funding, although still not enough to cover everything that we need. Given that, we seem to have reached an existential crisis now in local government, what are the plans going forward at a higher level to consult and review this as they've been doing in England? Because clearly we can't go on like this,
Yeah, I'm happy to come in on that, and I think as the context paper lays out, both myself and the Chief Executive have been working particularly hard on Clackmannanshires behalf in respect of this. We've had various different engagements with government ministers, with civil servants, with COSLA. Ultimately, it's a decision that will probably be taken above us as to the distribution formula. I mean, if you were listening to the radio this morning, you'll see there was an audit report out about the increase in additional support needs within our schools. And that was clearly saying that the distribution formula that is currently in place is not meeting the needs of individual areas, because there are some areas where those needs are greater than others, particularly more deprived areas. And for me, that's a perfect example of where the funding formula lets down Clackmannanshire. Though from my perspective, there's little appetite within COSLA to change this funding formula, because while some people lose out, there are others who gain from the funding formula. And as we know, when you're working in an organisation or working in the constraints of an organisation like that, the majority tends to kind of win out. There is a lot of work being done around transformation and public sector reform, and some of the discussions that we've been having with the Scottish Government is they are, particularly keen on the work that we've been doing with our partners locally and nationally, and they want to support that. But they want to support that because they see us as being quite pioneering and quite willing to move forward to transform how we do things here. And that's something I think we should be quite proud of. I would say from a leader of the council perspective, I'm certainly doing what I can to make sure our voice is heard within that. It certainly has been. I think we've all got a role to play in that though, in our different kind of forums, etc. So I would encourage everybody to use that while they can.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rennie?
Yeah, just on the transformation point, I was just a bit confused because you were saying about how much it was going to cost for the ongoing work with the other local authorities. And obviously it states in the papers that we'll be coming to a budget position on what that's going to be. I just think, you know, is there any idea of what that money, because you said for collaborative working. For me, collaborative working doesn't have a financial implication, so I'm just wondering, like, what is exactly meant by collaborative working?
Thanks, Councillor. So we've got a range of proposals that we're looking at the moment. So very well reported already is the work that, particularly through the People Directorate, we've been taking forward. So the work that Lorraine's doing, that would all fall under the current definition of collaborative working. So working with the Hunter Foundation, Vardy Foundation, Columba 1400 and so on. That has allowed us to really transform the way we're delivering services. As we look ahead, when we've been looking at what do we need to do, one of our biggest issues, and it goes back to the previous question on distribution as well, is the fact that we really do not benefit from the economies of scale, given our scale. And for that reason, actually, we've had a long history in Clacks of working in partnership on a variety of things. And you'll see, I think, in this paper or even in the appendices, it refers to a number of examples of things where we've got partnership arrangements in place. What we're looking at now is, can we look at that a little bit more radically, working with others? So there is one proposal that's mentioned in this paper, which it references working with other councils to look at what we could do, either individually or collectively, thinking about how we either look at delivering that mixed economy of service delivery that we've agreed to in our target operating model. So us collectively working with others, or working with, you know, amongst ourselves to reduce costs, get more benefit, and also improve service. The biggest issue that all of us have faced has been around resilience, and all facing difficulties with recruitment retention. We've had significant issues in that, and it's quite a well-rehearsed narrative, as you know, nationally. So there will be a lot of benefits in that. But at the most radical end, of course, there's the prospect of thinking about, do you actually look at integrating certain functions so that you actually design from the service user's point of view, then you look at the design of what the operational delivery needs to look like, and then you look at the structures and costs that flow from that. So we're moving very much into that space just now, and that's what some of what is referenced in that paper.
Question.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm still really not understanding. So, for example, you mentioned all those different bits of, I mean, that's been brilliant work by, obviously, People Directorate and bringing funds into Clackmannanshire. That seems to be more money coming in. And, like, in terms of services combining, that feels to me more like cost reduction rather than cost increase. So I'm not really sure where the additional costs are coming in on that.
Sorry, Councillor, I understand the question better now. So the issue is you need to invest to get to that place that I'm describing. So at the moment, we're looking at a scoping piece of work. It was looking across the 3 North Valley councils. Just had notification it's likely to be across 2 councils. But we've been looking at how we take forward that work. We don't have the capacity, either individually or collectively, to do that ourselves, so we need to get external assistance, and we need to pay for that. So that transformation fund, actually, in that context, these types of pieces of work are really significant, very detailed, and they do cost quite a bit, so you need to be able to have some cover to pay for them. So that's what that money would be used for. Sorry, I've misunderstood what you were saying.
Just, again, like, was there not, like, I mean, I could be totally wrong, but like, was there not a couple of years ago when we did that already? We hired people in to do the transformation. Like, we brought consultants in to do the transformation side of things. I have a memory in a previous council that we did do that. We had officers in who were covering that specific area.
I'm trying to think of examples I can think of. So we've done things at service level. So, for instance, we've used Vanguard in housing in the past. So that's been on, we've brought them in, we've done a complete system review, and performance was improved and costs reduced as a result of that. And interestingly, I think Murray's just fairly recently brought that back in and said they need to revisit that work again because things had started to creep up again. And there's probably other examples of things like that. We've not done it on this scale, Councillor, you know, so we're looking at something much more fundamental that's looking at corporate. Individual service potential, yes, but also thinking about corporate management and delivery as well. So that's a step, quite a big step forward from where we've been historically, if that makes sense.
One last, I promise. Right, just one last. So just in terms of, we've talked a lot about capacity, and I know there's time capacity, but there's also personal capacity. Does it not make sense to train up and use existing people to take this forward? Because then essentially you're getting people who are there with the skills moving forward in the future. Does that not make more sense to consultancy?
So one of the things that we have seen, and the paper does make reference to it, is that as our staffing numbers have reduced over a period of time, our ability to have sort of functional experts has been diminished because we've cut back staff numbers quite significantly. We're also small, so our officers naturally have very wide spans of control in terms of what we ask of them in terms of their role design. So the capacity to do it and learn the new skills where we can, we do that. So we've done things, as you know, like through the work on digital and data transformation. We've had the digital champions. There's been really good work going on in that space and in other areas as well. Actually, if you look at the kind of, you might not, the capacity building type work, you know, that we've done working with communities, service user groups, that allows us to start to look at other options in the future where we've maybe not had the capacity in the past. For something as significant as this, it requires significant expertise. It requires experience of having looked at these sorts of models and knowing what others have done over quite a wide geographic area, not even just in Scotland, but beyond Scotland. So that is what you're looking for, that kind of level of expertise to do this and to understand what the learning is from those activities and what the pitfalls are, so that obviously you don't go down the same routes.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Councillor
It's just in regards to, obviously, we were talking about the reserves and the cost pressures. This is a bit going to be a bit weird, sorry, microphone. Sorry, I'll just start again. Yeah, so we were talking about the kind of the reserves for those cost pressures, and obviously if we kind of eat into that, if we take a kind of another route than what's kind of proposed with the administration budget, I think that could mean, because of obviously those cost pressures that we don't have control over, as in what we've talked about, say the salary increase, that could mean a real position where we would have to have another mid-year budget. And obviously we've seen the proposals that were put into this budget that we've decided we wouldn't want to take. Could that mean that we would be creating a really strong position where our policy of no compulsory redundancies would actually be seriously have to be looked at getting changed in order to meet those pressures?
So what you said is correct in terms of we would have to bring a budget back to council and we would have to look at all options on the table. So I think Nicky had said earlier that we would look at all the officer savings proposals that we put forward that haven't been chosen as part of this budget. But as I said, all options, so compulsory redundancies would be an option we could look at to reduce expenditure to cover that. So that is definitely a feasible option that we may have to look at.
Just in regards to obviously those proposals that have been, because it would be mid-year, I take it some of them wouldn't even be able to apply because of mid-year, because I'm just thinking like, you know, there's some contracts that we'd be given now, but we wouldn't be able to look at them mid-year because obviously they were in contract. So that would mean that kind of position is even more kind of unstable.
Yes, so we would have to look at each of the proposals that we've previously put forward and look at the timing of them. So inbuilt into some of them at the moment are time delays. If it's staffing, then we have to allow time for that voluntary redundancy process to happen. So we would have to look at that. If there's a contract, we would have to look at the end date of the contract and any notice period that we would have to put in place. So although those savings proposals we've got at the moment, we may not be able to enact them all from day one of council approving them and generate the saving. And we would be partway through the year, so it wouldn't be a full year saving, which most of the savings are based on. So there would need to be recalculations of those proposals as well.
Thank you. If I can just add to what Lindsay said. So Lindsay's talked about things like notice period, practical things that would impact our ability to implement. But there is a further consideration as well, is that from a financial point of view, this council established some years ago an employment fund. And that employment fund was created so that if we wanted to take employment-related savings, we would be able to get the benefit immediately. So the way that works is that it basically funds the cost of severance. If you don't have that fund, it means that you have to wait until the cost of severance has been paid back, which typically takes about 2 years. So if you're diminishing the employment fund and the amount that's available there, it will affect your ability to be able to implement the savings that you need to reduce, even if it was staffing. So that there could be, things that start to conflict. So these things all need to be taken into account when you're considering setting the budget, that if we thought that was a prospect, that we've got sufficient cover through an employment fund route, if we thought we were going to have to come back in year and maybe look at some employment-related savings as well. So you don't want to get to that point and realise that you've not got the ability to get the benefit of the employment-related savings, not just because of practical issues that are contractual and about notice periods and so on, but also from a financial point of view.
Councillor.
So I take it that would mean that when we're sitting here next year as well, it would put us in an even worse position than what we could foresee just now.
Yeah, so any use of the short-term reserves, so we're talking about exhausting all those reserves, so that would add to the gap. But also, if we've reduced if we've taken more savings options to close to meet that gap throughout the year, then there are even less options that we know we're going to have a gap in the next year. So when the list of savings proposals come forward, it is still those that are going to affect statutory service delivery that will come forward, but it just means that that's significantly reduced as well, and we have potentially a reduced amount of staffing to reduce even further.
I was just going to make the point, actually. I know it's a bit of an obvious one, but actually, if you're at the point of revisiting the savings that we've already given you, that haven't been taken in the proposed budget that we've got just now, if we were to come back, if we remember that a significant proportion of our costs are employee related, so it is really important to think about those two things together. So maybe potentially significant impacts in the service space, but also from an employer point of view, there will be significant considerations there too. So these are the dynamics. I'm trying to cast my head ahead in case we found ourselves in that situation, what we would have to think about. We'd be wanting to make sure that you've got sufficient sitting at the back of you to cover what needs to happen to allow you to do that revisit of the budget and be able to fund it.
Councillor.
So could that also mean that next year that during, obviously when you're giving your accountancy, that we'd have to look at raising council tax even higher next year to make up for this kind of deficit?
So, as you know, council tax is one of the few levers that we have to raise income, alongside fees and charges, which is quite a minimal amount compared to council tax. And once we set council tax for the year, we can't change that mid-year to go any higher. We could only go lower. So that is not an option that we'd be able to use during the year if we had to come back and set a budget. It is one of the options that we've got available as part of the 26-27 budget setting. So potentially, if that is the only lever that we've got to raise income to pay for the services, then there is an increase likely on council tax to pay for that.
Okay, thanks. Councillor McTaggart.
Thanks, Convener. So I'm just sort of trying to get my head around the scenarios that we've just been discussing. So basically, unless we can find a way to increase our income to meet the service delivery that's about to be presented in the administration budget. The scenario could be that we come back mid-year. That scenario could then result in a vicious circle of job losses, which will inevitably affect services. We don't have the people to deliver the services, or we cannot effectively deliver the services, or reduction in services, which will then impact the use of our current labour. So if we're not delivering the services, we don't need the jobs. So either way, we're in a vicious circle. If we have to come back in a few months' time and say, well, we don't have enough money to continue for the remainder of this year, we have to make changes. So either way, both result in loss of service, both result in loss of employment. Have I framed that right, or am I off on a tangent? Thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah, that's the correct understanding. If we have service cuts, then we would need the staff to deliver the services that we're not delivering anymore, and vice versa. If we didn't have the staff, we wouldn't be able to deliver the services. So yes, that's correct.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Okay, if we have no other questions, thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, everybody. Councillor Forson to move the paper.
Yep, thanks, Convener. As we prepare to agree on the General Services budget for 25-26, it's crucial that we reflect on our current financial position, the challenges that we face and our strategy for a sustainable future. As the paper outlines, Clackmannanshire Council is Scotland's smallest mainland authority by population, although not by size. And while our community is strong and resilient, we face unique and significant financial pressures. Our funding is primarily allocated based on population, which I think we all agree does not fully reflect the level of need for our area. We experience some of the highest levels of demand for services in Scotland, including child protection, domestic violence support and social care. However, the resources provided do not always match the real costs of delivering these essential services. Additionally, economic challenges persist, with high levels of unemployment and limited local employment opportunities. In addition, our recruitment and retention of skilled staff remains difficult due to our financial constraints, yet we do continue to meet the same legislative and policy requirements as larger councils. The Audit Scotland report published in September 2024 highlights concerns about our financial sustainability, noting that while we have achieved savings in recent years, there has been a reliance on one-off budget flexibilities and reserves to balance the budget. This approach is not sustainable and urgent action is required to secure longer-term financial stability. Over the past decade, we've made significant savings with over 70.5 million in budget reductions, but despite this, the financial pressures we face remain critical. Our revenue budget in the past year has been £161 million, and we face a further gap of £30 million over the next 4 years. As a council, we have taken difficult decisions, including reducing senior management posts, community asset transfers and service restructuring, but these measures alone are not enough to achieve long-term sustainability. The Audit Scotland report stresses that achieving financial sustainability will require a structured approach through a robust medium-term financial strategy. This strategy must integrate key aspects such as financial planning, workforce and digital strategies, as well as capital investment and service transformation. The report also highlights the need to reduce reliance on non-recurring funding sources, such as reserves and one-off budget measures, and to identify long-term sustainable savings and income opportunities. To address these challenges, we must focus on 3 key strategies. The first one is sustainable financial planning. We will continue to prioritise medium and long-term financial sustainability through prudent budget management and strategic investment. The Audit Scotland report underlines the importance of aligning our financial decisions with realistic, achievable savings targets, whilst ensuring the continued delivery of essential services. The second one is transformation and innovation. Our Be the Future programme is at the heart of our efforts to redesign services, maximise efficiency and leverage new funding opportunities. Audit Scotland acknowledges the progress made in this area and stresses the importance of accelerating the delivery of planned transformation initiatives which will ensure long-term financial sustainability. The third one is resilience and risk management. We must take a proactive approach to financial resilience by implementing stronger risk management strategies and maintaining adequate financial reserves. Audit Scotland highlights that while Clackmannanshire has maintained financial balance, further steps are needed to enhance financial stability and ensure the Council can withstand future financial pressures. Despite these financial constraints, our commitment to delivering high-quality public services remains steadfast. We have made great progress in areas such as early intervention, family wellbeing and community-led initiatives. However, the Audit Scotland report highlights challenges related to workforce capacity, recruitment and resilience. And addressing these issues will be key to ensuring service sustainability and continued improvement in performance. Through our continued partnerships with public and private sectors, we will work towards ensuring that every pound spent delivers maximum impact for our residents. And although, while the road ahead presents significant challenges, I am confident in our ability to navigate them with determination and innovation. I think by working together, making informed decisions and focusing on financial resilience and sustainability, we can ensure a stronger future for Clackmannanshire. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lindsay to second.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks to the Council Leader for that detailed overview. Really just a few things to pull out on the back of that. I think first and foremost it's a really helpful context. I think it's probably the first time we've had a context paper set out in this way, and I think it really does a good job of outlining, as has been outlined already, much of which we already are well aware of, both in terms of the financial situation and context that we're currently in, the ongoing challenges that we face in terms of financial sustainability, and also the steps that have been taken over not just recent years, but a number of years to enable us to try and get to a position of financial sustainability, but also the demand on services and the context in terms of the demographics of our area in which we live. As I say, these are all things that we're well and truly aware of. We get briefed on these regularly. We understand our context and we understand the financial situation that we're currently in. Hence why this budget is probably arguably one of the most important budgets coming forward in the next couple of papers that I've certainly been involved in. I've been involved in a process that has been part of those £70 million worth of savings over the last 8 years. It has not been easy. It has been hugely challenging to go through and effectively strip out services, redesign, and try and improve the efficiency of how we're operating. But at times we are stripping out services. We are creating a situation where we are not able, are not going to be able to deliver services in the way that our people out there want. And at the same time, putting in place tax rises that become seen to be unpalatable. But nonetheless, we've worked incredibly hard with council officers to reduce the amount of outgoing in terms of our revenue, to do it in a sustainable way. But we have used one-off reserves over a number of years now. And we can see across the country, I work with other local authorities in my other role, that other local authorities have the ability to use reserves. You know, if we look at our island colleagues, they have significant reserves that they are able to do exactly what Nikki has outlined and hold off, palm off the need to make significant savings. We've done that. We're past that stage now, unfortunately, and we need to find a position of financial sustainability that allows us to deliver a council for the future. We are good at partnerships. That isn't a panacea, and it's not always the option in terms of reducing our outgoings. Indeed, it allows us to deliver services, but in most cases doesn't reduce the amount that's outgoing within the council. The council leaders outlined, the pressure that we're under, not necessarily just internally or from, the members of the public, but the auditors are on us, and quite rightly so. We are not in a position of financial sustainability, and we need to work towards that. So Obviously happy to support this paper. I think it's a helpful context, a helpful reminder of the current situation, the pressures that are on us, the pressures that are being put on us, and we'll no doubt uncover more of these within the budget paper itself, not least the national insurance pressures that are going to be on us and our partners. So I'll leave it for that just now, conscious that the natural thing to do here is to stray into the budget debate, but I'll leave it for that just now, and I'll let debate take place. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So the paper's now open for debate. Anybody wish to debate the paper? Oh, sorry.
Not a debate as such, I'm just a bit confused. It feels like we've had a lot of the debate already that we're going to come on to later. This paper is an introduction paper. Obviously it states very sensible things, but because we've not got to the point of the actual debate on the budget itself, I feel I would have to abstain at this stage just because we're not at the budget debate yet.
Okay, so I think the point was made earlier on that there are separate papers, each one will be heard on its own merit and decision taken on that. I perfectly respect your right to choose whether to participate in that or not, Councillor Rennie. Anybody else wish to take part in the debate? Councillor Coyne?
Yeah, I've just been thinking about what Councillor Rennie said, and I'm taking the view that they're two separate papers, and I don't think I want to get confused between the two. My understanding of this is it's setting a scene, a scenario. It's an information paper, although it does ask us to agree to 3 points on page 6. Prioritise and support, consolidate and implement. You'll be telling us this anyway in a minute. So I'm just looking to see if I have conflicts with any of those, and I don't think I have. So no, I'm happy enough to support the paper.
Okay, I mean, listen, it was inevitable that those papers were going to be inextricably linked, given the subject matter. It would be pretty bizarre if they weren't, didn't cross over into each other's territory, and I think that came through probably in some of the questioning where we started the debate rather than questions. So, to be honest, I think it was inevitable in terms of the subject matter of the two papers that were so closely linked. Does anybody else want to debate the paper any further? Mr. Forson, do you want an opportunity to sum up?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. It would have been good to get a bit more debate, particularly around about the recommendations, outlined within the paper. I think, this paper is separate from the budget paper, and it sets out to try and, I suppose, lay out Clackmannanshire context, our financial context, and where we are moving forward. And I just wanted to point out, we are not alone in this situation. However, we are on the vanguard because of our size. If you look at the Audit Scotland report here, which gives budget gaps as a percentage of the revenue budget, Clackmannanshire is the third highest here. Although quite interestingly, Fife's, which was the second lowest, so you would think that they were in a particularly good position. Yesterday, their best value audit report stated quite clearly that although up until now they've been able to make savings without reducing services, they are now at a turning point, and they have £46 million worth of savings to make within the next few years. So Clackmannanshire's context is out there at the front, and we all know that it's a result of our size. However, every single other council in Scotland is now reaching that point. We're just at the front of it all.
Okay, thank you. So the paper's asking us to note 2.1 to 2.4, and then asks us to agree to prioritise, support, invest in the key activities being taken forward to mitigate the pressures covered in Section 5 and to deliver service and financial sustainability. Further asks us to agree to consolidate and implement its medium-term financial strategy and the financial resilience framework, which will be regularly monitored and reported to Council through the regular budget strategy update reports. And finally, we've been asked to agree to identify any further potential options that we'd like developed to mitigate current and future service and financial sustainability challenges, in addition to the current activities summarised in Section 5 of the report. Are we happy to approve that paper? No? Yeah. So put that paper to a roll call vote, please.
Thanks, Convener. This is the roll call vote on item 3 of the agenda. Councillor Fairley?
For.
Councillor Lee? For. Councillor Lindsay? Graham? For. Councillor McCuckey?
Abstain.
Councillor Balsillie?
For.
Councillor Keogh.
Abstain.
Councillor Law. 4. Councillor Hamilton. 4. Councillor Rennie. Councillor McTaggart. 4. Councillor Earl. Councillor Forson. 4.
Chair, can you please ask Councillor Law to stop rolling their eyes at me?
So I haven't picked up on that, but if we can all just remember what we're supposed to do in terms of code of conduct around the behaviour in the chamber, across the chamber of each other, please.
So I think the last councillor I got to was Councillor Forson, who was 4. Councillor Holden.
Abstain.
Councillor Quinn.
4.
Councillor Harrison.
4.
Councillor Martin.
Abstain.
Councillor Coyne.
4.
Okay, so the vote on that paper is 11 for and 6 abstentions, so the paper's carried. Thank you. Item 4 is the Treasury Management Strategy Statement 2025-26. Lindsay, you going to take us through that as well?
Thank you. This report presents for approval the Treasury Management Strategy Statement for 25-26 and prudential indicators for the 3 years 25-26 to 27-28. In accordance with the Treasury Management Code of Practice and the Prudential Code, local authorities are required to prepare an annual Treasury Management Strategy Statement, including these key prudential indicators. The proposed strategy and indicators ensure that the capital investment plans set out in the proposed budget for both General Fund and the previously approved Housing Revenue Account budget are affordable, prudent and sustainable within available revenue funding. The strategy sets out the Council's proposed borrowing strategy for the year and the Council's current and forecast debt positions based on the proposed indicative capital programme as set out in Appendix A of the Revenue and Capital Budget 25-26 report, also on this agenda. Chart 1 in Section 5 shows the level of borrowing required to fund the proposed capital programme, with a high level of borrowing aligned with the front-loading of capital investment within the first 5 years, which reduces towards the end of the 20-year capital programme within the overall funding envelope. The ratio of cost of borrowing to revenue funding is shown in Table 2 and is a key indicator to determine whether this borrowing is affordable. The ratio increases as borrowing increases but starts to reduce in the second half of the 20-year capital programme and maintains below the Scottish average for most of the 20 years. The strategy also sets out the Council's policy on borrowings in advance of need and debt rescheduling opportunities. Section 3 of the strategy sets out the strategy for investments and prospects for interest rates. Table 7 shows the forecasted slow downward trend in interest rates for both borrowings and investments from March 2025. And Appendix B sets out the Council's investment portfolio as at the 31st of January. The level of available cash balances, interest and borrowing rates and the need to borrow is a focus of continual review to minimise the cost of borrowing of current and future investment. I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Do we have any questions? Lindsay, Councillor Coyne, followed by Councillor Rennie.
Thanks, Convener. A broad question, first of all, Lindsay. What would you say were the major things that have changed from the last statement of this kind? Is anything that we should be taking significantly from this report? There's an awful lot of words in it, and I'm sure the last one had an awful lot of words in it too. I'm interested in what's different this time. What is different?
Thank you. So the strategy follows the same lines as the previous year. There are no significant deviations in this strategy from the previous year. I think one of the key things is just to look at around the borrowing. So the curve, again, last year was the same. It was an increase in borrowing, and that reflects the investment in the capital programme. But what's different this year is there was we were looking to have more borrowing at the end of the 20 years. So we were over the funding envelope. So this actually presents a reduction in that. So we're actually 8 million below the funding envelope over the 20 years. So it's just showing that we're not increasing our borrowing, even though we're making significant investment in several projects within the programme. The ratio of the financing cost to the overall revenue stream have also reduced slightly. But in terms of the strategy overall, no major deviations. We still are going with the principles of our risk. So to make sure we've got enough cash balances to fund the spend of the council first before investing.
And did you reshape that graph that you spoke about a minute ago by just moving things up and down the line, or have you chopped some stuff or put some new stuff in?
The capital programme itself is not reduced, so we have done some rephasing. One of the significant movements is the timing of the payments of the wellbeing hub, so that's moved into 26-27. But in terms of any significant movement in that, no, the capital programme, we've actually added a couple of extra projects as new bids into the capital programme, you see in the budget. What is probably making the movement is the interest rate forecast, because they've come down slightly. So we always take account of them and our borrowing strategy. So in the past year, we've tried to minimise our borrowing, so we've not taken as much borrowing as we initially thought we might do. So that's affected that curve as well, so it's come down slightly.
Thanks. Just while I've got the thing. Yeah, on page 33.7.7, it says council uses MUFG, corporate markets, etc. Would there be?
Oh gosh, sorry about that. Somebody should have said. Want to start again, or did you catch it? 7.7 on page 33. Council uses MUFG, corporate markets, and to advise them. Now that's the council as in the officer corps, I guess. It's not the council as in this council. Would there be any merit in us having any contact with MUFG? Would there be any point to that?
Yes. I think that would be useful if we could ask the advisors, MUFG. So that's a new name, so members might recognise that as Link or Capital Asset Services. They've gone through a number of names over the few years, but they are still the same advisors. So I welcome the opportunity to arrange a session where they can come up to speak to members and explain, go through the Treasury strategy and answer any questions you may have. Yep. And sorry, Nick is also pointing out that in the paper it also mentions the toolkit that's been developed. It's the Scottish Treasury Management Toolkit at 7.5, and it's been developed in partnership with SIPFA. So that's also open to members if they want to have a bit more insight into that.
I think you're leaning on 7.5, Dennis. Councillor Denny.
Yeah, thanks for that, Lindsay. It's a really interesting paper. I was just wanting to ask about the service concessions situation. So is it correct that the service concessions are being set against the loan payments for this year, next year, the year after, right up to 2038-39, and then after that, a lot of payments will start coming into play?
Thank you. Yeah, so members might remember a number of years ago, or a couple of years ago in 2023, we realigned our service concessions, which relates to the PPP and how we account for the payments, not anything to do with the term of the contract, but we extended that. So that presented a past year benefit that we've taken to reserves, but it also generates an in-year benefit of around about £1 million over the next few years. And that is being used to offset the loans fund principal repayments within the revenue budget to bring that cost down. So that is spreading the payments through the accounts, commensurate with the benefits they receive from the assets, so across the 50-year lifespan. So they are already included within the revenue budget, reducing the principal repayments for loans fund up to the point that we get those benefits. And then that then stops at that point.
Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, thanks, Lindsay. Councillor Forson to move the paper.
Thanks, Convener. I'm pleased to propose the Treasury Management Strategy for 25-26. This is a document that builds upon and consolidates our existing investment strategy and prudential borrowing framework. This strategy is a vital part of our financial planning and plays a key role in supporting the delivery of the Council's ambitious capital investment plans. In particular, this strategy reflects the updated 20-year capital investment programme, which has been proposed as part of the General Fund Revenue and Capital Budget in the next paper. It aligns with the priorities and objectives that have been identified for the upcoming financial year. At the heart of the strategy are the prudential indicators outlined in Appendix A, and these indicators have been carefully determined based on the budget proposals contained within the capital programmes for both the General Fund and the Housing Revenue Account. These documents, which are also part of today's agenda, lay the foundation for the financial decisions that we will be making. As we support the investment outlined in these programmes, it's important to highlight that our borrowing strategy has evolved over time to reflect our changing needs and the broader economic landscape. In particular, our previous borrowing strategy, which aimed to minimise external debt, was revised as part of the Treasury Management Strategy in 21-22. Prior to that, a strategy approved in 2012 successfully reduced external debt by over £20 million by March 25. This represents a major achievement in our efforts to maintain financial stability. As we move into 25-26, the cost of borrowing remains low and affordable, with the projected ratio of the cost of borrowing to our general revenue fund standing at 3.89%. This is a significant improvement, particularly when compared to the Scottish average of 5.75% for the financial year 23-24. This low borrowing cost enables us to continue making necessary capital investments. Now, looking ahead, we will be increasing borrowing levels through to 2034-35, and this increase reflects the cumulative additional investment that has been planned, particularly in areas such as the Council's Wellbeing Hub, Walkies School, the Learning Estate and digital developments. However, it is worth noting that in the later years of the programme, as investment slows down, we do expect the ratio of borrowing costs to reduce. In conclusion, the strategy provides a solid financial framework to enable the Council to deliver on its capital investment priorities while maintaining a strong focus on affordability and financial sustainability. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Finn. Lindsay, second.
Thanks, Convener. Just happy to formally second after that. Thanks.
Thank you. The paper's now open for debate. Anybody wish to debate? No? On the basis of no debate, there's no need to sum up. Councillor Lindsay, so the paper's asked us to note the information contained within the report, to note the continuation of the borrowing strategy to support continued capital investment, and to note the investment portfolio position as at the 31st of January 2025. It asks us to approve the Treasury Management Strategy Statement for 25-26 and prudential indicators for the years 25-26 to 27-28, which are attached as Appendix A in compliance with the Prudential Code requirements. We're happy to approve. Okay, thank you. I'm going to call for a comfort break now, colleagues. We can come back at 11 o'clock.